Okay, up next we've got 1949 Jane Eyre, starring Mary Sinclair and Charlton Heston, and put out by the CBS Studio One in Broadway. This one was made for a live performance on television, so you can imagine there was lots of pressure involved. It's a very small set. I think it's just basically a gate for Lowood, the interior of Thornfield, and like a small garden outside, and that is where the whole thing takes place. Needless to say, they made a lot of cuts to the story, and obviously the bulk of what remains is the whole Rochester angle. As far as the cast is concerned, Mary Sinclair as Jane Eyre. I don't know anything about her, never saw her in anything before, which makes sense because she was primarily, possibly only a TV actress. She's got this there and gone again type British accent. She was like the dreamiest Jane Eyre I ever saw. She just kind of moons around, and she's like a kid in a candy store when she gets there. And she's like, oh, it's all so wonderful. I'm so happy. And she's very, I don't know. She's what I call a mooncalf. She smiles too much. And, like after the fire scene, she's very touchy-feely with Rochester. It's like she's weird. And this was a script thing. They have her tell Mrs. Fairfax, like, declare her love of Rochester to Mrs. Fairfax. And the three of us were watching this and we're like, what? Why don't you just tell all the world? I'm gonna broadcast my feelings. Charlton Heston as Rochester. This was definitely before he became big and was known for, these big brawny roles like Moses and Judah Ben-Hur and stuff. So, this was different. I guess he worked for the Studio One, other things like Petruchio and Macbeth and Heathcliff for them. So I guess it's before they figured out that this wasn't quite his niche. I just didn't feel the same way towards his interpretation as I feel about some others, It just didn't seem likable. Like, he's too nice and friendly at some points, and yet then other times he's like a jerk. He's got like these emo outbursts, and he's just, everything's awful. And then there's one point where he's crying on the stairs for her to come back, and after the fire he's like all threatening and stern, and it's like he's not grumpy enough here, and yet he's too standoffish here, and it was like too much too late. I don't know. Things that were just bad, and the changes that were demanded by it being an hour long, less than an hour, special on TV and live, all those things aside, like, it moved too fast because they had to cut so much out of it. But then, like, the pacing seemed really slow. After 15 minutes, my dad got up and left because he was bored. My mom fell asleep, and then I started falling asleep. It did not capture our attention. And it was confusing. Like, there's the period after Jane runs away, and it was probably only a couple minutes after that she came back to Thornfield. And it was just so confusing. And I was taking notes, and I wrote, Jane leaves, and where is she? Doing what? She hears his voice, and it seems like it's in her memory, because it doesn't seem to be that she's hearing him say things that are obviously flashbacks. And then he's calling her, or what? But, like, we never got any idea of how long she was away or what she was doing in that time, and it seems like it's only a matter of days. She comes back to Thornfield, and she meets Mrs. Fairfax, and she's like, oh, look at what happened to the place. And I'm peering at the screen, and I couldn't see any damage done to the set if they're talking about the fire, and it didn't make sense. The clothing just did not seem period appropriate, and, like, Jane's arms, like, Jane had, like, short sleeves on, shocking, and, like, just the stuff, it was ugly sometimes. There was one thing that I was like, is Rochester wearing a bow around his neck? And, like, he had a really silly looking greatcoat flaps on. She had, like, Scarlett O'Hara hair, and it just was weird. This is an old TV thing, so not great quality. It was rough to watch because like the sound would fade out, and there were these things that I can only call comical visual illusions, where I don't know, because the depth of the set was strange. It made it look at one point like Rochester had brought his foot up and was like, he put his foot in Jane's lap. And we're like, huh? That's awfully rude. I don't know, the camera had a tendency to just kind of like wander away. Like we'd still be in a conversation over here and the camera's just... It's like if I was talking and the camera just started to like wander away from me and it was like, hello, hey. Here we come to the list of things that wouldn't happen. Jane and Rochester dying together. No, she made an adamant point, like, in the book. I do not want to eat with you. Yeah, we're engaged, but I don't want to eat with you. Not because I don't want to see what you look like when you're eating, which is how I would feel. I don't want the person to see what I look like when I'm eating. It's a station thing. The thing where Jane tells Mrs. Fairfax that she's in love with Rochester. Adele calls Rochester her papa. Like, oh, papa, and, he's okay with it. When they have the party, all the guests come over, Rochester is just, like, boasting of his awesome governess to the group, and he makes Jane play the spinet for them, and he just seemed like a jerk for doing that, and she's just, and, well, the timing of things was weird, because when Rochester proposes, and he seemed, like, half crazy here, but he said, I've loved you from the first moment you stepped in the library, and I don't know, that bothered me. I don't think that he falls in love with her at first sight. I think he's intrigued by her, but if you take out the horse thing, then it's really messed up, and they did take out the horse thing, and even my dad noticed it. He's like, oh, you bewitched my horse, except you didn't, because there was no horse thing. But, you know, on the bright side, we saw a lot more of Bertha than we usually do, and she had a really good laugh. She reminded me of Elsa Lanchester. For all of you sticklers out there, Blanche was a brunette, and they had the canonical real men discussion, like, I could never be with a man who... Well, the men of... what do they say? The men of today aren't real men. I want someone who's gonna just be kind of wild and strong and interesting. And, well, they kept most of the famous lines. It's not like they were like, we're presenting Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and there's nothing recognizable about it. Like, at least they kept the bare bones of the stuff, as pertains to the main section of the book. So, not a great movie thing. I don't even feel like I can call it a movie. It was like watching a play. So my mom is really looking forward to us moving on to something better. She actually said, like, when are we gonna watch some of the good Jane Eyres? And she likes Charlton Heston, so that tells you something.